After freeing herself from her curse by killing her mother, the now beautiful and good-natured Princess Mina took refuge with the bird king Cerulean and his advisor, Idro. They left the fairy Susi's palace together, before their hostess was awake, and travelled to Alni's city. Introducing Mina as Fausta, Idro's assistant, the three of them were welcomed into the palace to speak with its current warden, Hortense, the head gardener. Learning that Florine had left for Laguna, Cerulean decides to fly back alone to try to see her. Florine and her guards had reached the port in Videla around the time that Cerulean, Idro and Mina were travelling from Susi's palace to Alni, and arrived in Laguna the same day the Blue Bird embarked on his return home. It was the first time Florine had travelled without her father or mother, but she knew the custom of showing a sign of her royalty, which for Alni was a ring with an emblem of a lily, at the Merchants' Guild office. The clerk in the merchant house received her politely, and arranged a boat to take her along the canals to the palace. One of the city guards travelled with them. It was a beautiful city, very different to Alni. The walls and buildings were decorated with statues and motifs of various aquatic creatures, fishing boats, and the blues and greens of the sea. When they reached the palace, the guard escorted them to the gates and spoke to the gate warden. Then they were shown inside. From there, they were taken to the throne room. Tressio was sitting on the throne.
"Welcome to Laguna, Your Majesty. I am Tressio,"
said the high priest. His rank and vocation were clear to Florine from his robes. "Thank you," said Florine with a nod. She turned to her guards and said, "Please, leave us." With a slight air of reluctance and concern, the guards did as they were asked. There were no Lagunan guards attending the priest. She had not told her guards about Cerulean's condition, but assumed the figure on the throne was aware of it. But she began cautiously. "I was hoping for an audience with King Cerulean. Is he not in the palace?"
"I regret that he is not, Your Majesty."
Florine decided to speak a little more plainly. "I've spoken with him many times over the past years, while he has not been himself. I'd be most grateful if you could tell me if he is expected back in the palace soon."
"It is quite possible,"
replied Tressio.
"but as a queen yourself, you will know that he may change his plans as he sees fit."
Florine nodded.
"You are, of course, welcome to stay here in the palace until he returns,"
said the priest. "Thank you." Tressio stood from the throne and stepped down from its platform. Keeping a measure of distance between himself and Queen Florine, he nodded slightly, then motioned for her to follow him. Was the relationship between the church and the throne different in Laguna? Wondered Florine, as she walked behind him to the door, which he opened. Outside, there was no sign of the guards from Alni. Florine inquired about them, and Tressio assured her that they had been given somewhere to stay, just as she would soon. 2 palace guards that were outside the throne room joined them. Eventually they came to a chamber, and Florine was shown inside. Moments after Tressio and the guards had left, she heard the door being locked. Florine, ever sweet-natured, but now quite familiar with cruelty, felt her heart sink. She was not, as a queen, to be protected from captivity. And so it was as if she were back in her tower in Alni, and this brought the memory of Cerulean strongly to her mind, and she smiled, sadly. It occurred to her then that his appearance as a human was now quite faint in her memory. She had loved him longer as a bird than as a man. Quickly finding herself in the rhythm of that chapter of her life, she sat by the window of the room and sang, as she had many times before. Blue bird, come to my side. Cerulean was of course bound for Laguna, and as he approached the palace, heading for the window of his bedchamber that he had commanded Tressio to leave open, he heard the familiar song from Florine's window, At first he thought that he was hallucinating, that common experience where, yearning for the face and voice of the one you love, it appears on the faces of strangers or comes from their mouths, and he carried on to his bedchamber. But finding the window closed, he circled again around the palace. Again he heard the song, and hovered in the air listening for its source. All of a sudden, an arrow flew at him, and he avoided it only narrowly. Then, seeing an open window, and sure it was from there that the voice was coming, he flew straight for it. As he appeared on the windowsill, it was Florine's turn to doubt her eyes. "Florine, my heart," said the Bird King. "My love," replied Florine, stroking his crown of feathers. "Something is wrong. They've locked me in here." Cerulean nodded. "I fear the priest has betrayed me. What shall we do?" "I know where the keys are kept," replied Cerulean. "If I can find another way in, I'll grab one and return with it." "Is it the only way?" "It isn't, but all have dangers. This way is faster, but perhaps more perilous, yes. I could fly back to Alney and speak to my advisor Idro. Oh, I should tell you, Mina is there too." Florine was a little shocked to hear this, but showed no sign of anger and said nothing, waiting patiently for Cerulean to explain. In fact, upon hearing her stepsister's story, she wept. "My dear sister, and Repiara dead." In turn, Florine explained what had happened to her in Laguna. "With any luck, your guards are in the palace dungeon. Do they know about my current form?" "They don't." Well, it shouldn't be a problem. I'll head there first. There should be a key for this room there. If your men are there, I'll free them and we'll return. There's a hidden way out from the palace and an old enchanted boat." Hearing the plan expressed so simply, Florine was reassured. She trusted that her king would be able to carry it out. But there was a detail that they had missed. The archer had seen Cerulean fly to the window, and had already alerted the other guards and Tressio himself. As Cerulean was preparing to fly from the window, they heard a key in the lock, and the door swung open. 2 guards in armor came in. Without hesitation, Cerulean launched himself at them, flying close to their faces, staying away from their attempts to swat or grab him. Florine's heart raced as she watched him, realizing that the elegant plan that he had proposed moments ago was now likely beyond reach. Saying nothing, while the guards flailed around at their king, she quietly walked to the window, opened it wide, took a deep breath, and jumped for the water below.